Pressure does not break people. Pressure reveals people. When life gets heavy, deadlines close in, money tightens, relationships strain, most minds panic, hesitate, and collapse inward. But the top 1%, they sharpen, they slow down, they gain clarity. This audiobook will teach you how to think when thinking is hardest, how to stay dangerous under stress, decisive under chaos, and calm when everything demands you react emotionally. Because once you master pressure, nothing in life controls you again. Chapter 1: Stop reacting. Pressure is a signal, not a threat. Pressure is not an emergency. Read that again. Pressure is not an emergency. You were trained to think it is, trained to feel your chest tighten, trained to rush, trained to panic. Trained to react emotionally instead of strategically. And that training is why most people fall apart the moment stakes rise. But the top 1% see pressure differently. They don't treat pressure as danger. They treat it as information. That's the first separation point. That's the line between winners and everyone else. You have a choice. When pressure shows up, you can treat it like a fire alarm, or you can treat it like a data signal. One leads to chaos. The other leads to clarity. Pressure is simply your environment telling you something matters. Nothing more, nothing less. The problem is not pressure. The problem is how fast you react to it. Reaction is emotional. Reaction is sloppy. Reaction is unconscious. Reaction hands control to whatever just happened to you. The top 1% do not react. They respond. That's the key. Response requires space. Response requires control. Response requires discipline. And discipline begins with one simple decision: slow down when everything tells you to speed up. Look at elite surgeons. When a complication appears on the table, they don't start moving faster. They don't raise their voice. They don't let panic enter their hands. They slow their breathing. They narrow their focus. They simplify the task to the next correct move, because pressure doesn't demand speed. Pressure demands precision. Same with military leaders. Same with fighter pilots. Same with CEOs making decisions that affect thousands of lives and millions of dollars. When the stakes rise, amateurs scatter their attention. Professionals compress it. Pressure means prioritize. Pressure means focus. Pressure means simplify. Say it again. Pressure means prioritize. Pressure means focus. Pressure means simplify. Most people do the opposite. Under pressure, they try to solve everything at once. They think about consequences. They imagine failure. They replay past mistakes. They catastrophize the future. That's weak thinking, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. It's not about talent. It's not about confidence. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Specifically, the discipline to pause before you move. You have a choice. Every time pressure hits, there is a moment, small, quiet, almost invisible, where you decide how you will interpret it: threat or signal, emergency or information. Most people skip that moment. They let their nervous system decide for them. The top 1% don't. They train that moment. They know that the body reacts faster than the mind. Heart rate spikes, breathing shortens, muscles tense, vision narrows. That's biology. You don't fight it, you manage it. That's why the first action under pressure is never mental. It's physical. Slow the breath, lower the shoulders, plant the feet. Calm the body and the mind follows. That's the key. You cannot think clearly in a panicked body, and you cannot win under pressure without clear thinking. So here is the rule: if you feel rushed, you are already losing. Pressure tries to steal your time perception. It makes everything feel urgent, immediate, now or never. That's a lie. There is almost always time to pause, time to breathe, time to choose the next move deliberately. And even when time is genuinely limited, calm thinking still beats frantic action. You don't need their permission to slow down. Not your boss's permission, not society's permission, not the situation's permission. Control is internal. Pressure does not force you to react. You allow it. That's hard to hear, but it's true. You have a choice. Once you stop treating pressure like a threat, something powerful happens. Your attention sharpens. Noise fades, irrelevant details drop away. That's why pressure exists. Pressure strips life down to what matters. The weak mind resists this. The strong mind uses it. Pressure asks one question: what is essential right now? And most people answer it wrong because they're emotional. They focus on how they feel instead of what needs to be done. They focus on outcomes instead of actions. They focus on fear instead of execution. The top 1% answer differently. They ask, what is the next correct move? What is within my control? What action produces the most leverage? And they ignore everything else. Pressure means prioritize. Pressure means focus. Pressure means simplify. This is why pressure breaks some people and builds others. Same pressure, same stakes, same environment, different interpretation. You don't rise to pressure. You reveal how you think. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If pressure overwhelms you, it's not because it's too much. It's because your thinking is undisciplined. That's not an insult. That's an opportunity, because discipline can be trained. Start here. Next time pressure hits, do not solve the whole problem. Solve 1 inch of it. One call, one decision, one step forward. Momentum returns clarity. Clarity returns confidence. That's the sequence, not the other way around. You don't wait to feel calm to act. You act correctly and calm follows. That's the key. Pressure is not trying to destroy you. It's trying to direct you. But only if you listen instead of panic. Only if you respond instead of react. Only if you decide, consciously, that pressure works for you, not against you. You have a choice. Master this and pressure becomes fuel. Ignore it and pressure becomes a cage. You've learned how to stop reacting. You've learned how to read pressure as information. You've learned how to slow down when it matters most. Now comes the next layer. Because reading pressure is useless if your emotions still control your decisions. You've mastered the pause. Now, let's talk about control. Chapter 2, Emotional Control is the Real Intelligence. Most people misunderstand intelligence. They think intelligence is fast thinking. They think it's clever words. They think it's degrees, titles, and test scores. Under pressure, none of that matters. When stakes rise, the only intelligence that counts is emotional control. That's the key. You can be the smartest person in the room and still make the worst decision if your emotions are driving the wheel. And most people never realize that's what's happening. They say, I just reacted. They say, I had no choice. They say, that's just how I felt. Those are excuses. You have a choice. The top 1% are not emotionless. They feel everything: fear, doubt, anger, pressure, just like everyone else. The difference is simple and brutal. They do not obey what they feel. Feel it but don't follow it. Feel it but don't act on it. Say it again. Feel it but don't follow it. Feel it but don't act on it. Most people treat emotions like commands. If they feel anxious, they hesitate. If they feel angry, they lash out. If they feel overwhelmed, they shut down. That's not intelligence. That's conditioning. Emotions are signals, not instructions. And the moment you confuse the two, you lose control. It's not about suppressing emotion. That's weakness disguised as toughness. Suppressed emotion leaks out later through poor decisions, impulsive behavior, and self-sabotage. It's about regulating emotion. Regulation means you notice what you feel without letting it dictate your next move. That's real power. That's why elite performers appear calm, not because they feel less, but because they've trained the space between feeling and action. That space is everything. In that space, you decide who's in control, you or your nervous system. You have a choice. Watch a championship athlete miss a shot. Their face barely changes. Their body language stays neutral. They reset instantly. Now watch an amateur. They slump, they complain, they spiral, same emotion, different discipline. It's not about talent, it's not about confidence, it's not about personality, it's about discipline, specifically the discipline to delay reaction. Emotion moves fast, logic moves slow. If you act at the speed of emotion, logic never gets a vote. That's the trap. The top 1% slow the timeline. They don't argue with the feeling, they don't judge it, they don't try to make it disappear, they let it pass. Like weather, anger rises, let it rise, fear appears, let it appear, doubt whispers, let it whisper, but don't move, that's the key. You don't need their permission to pause, not the person who upset you, not the situation demanding urgency, not the voice in your head screaming for relief. Pause is power. Most mistakes under pressure happen because people are trying to escape discomfort instead of manage it. They speak too soon. They decide too fast. They act just to stop feeling uneasy, and they pay for it later. Short-term emotional relief creates long-term damage. The top 1% are willing to sit in discomfort longer than everyone else. That's why they win. Here's the rule: never make a permanent decision in a temporary emotional state. Say it again. Never make a permanent decision in a temporary emotional state. Emotions peak and fall if you let them. They burn hot but brief. If you don't feed them with action, they lose power. That's not theory, that's biology. Every time you choose not to react, you strengthen the part of your brain responsible for control. Every time you react impulsively, you weaken it. You are training yourself either way. You have a choice, and this applies everywhere. Business decisions, conversations, conflict, money, relationships. Emotional control is not about being cold, it's about being accurate. When emotions run high, accuracy drops. That's why the top 1% build rules for themselves before pressure arrives. They decide in advance: I don't respond when angry. I don't decide when anxious. I don't speak when emotionally flooded. Those rules protect them from themselves. That's the key. You don't rise to discipline in the moment. You fall to whatever rules you've built beforehand. So build them now. Here's a simple practice. When emotion spikes, name it silently. Anger, fear. Frustration, naming creates distance. Distance creates control. Control creates intelligence. Feel it, but don't follow it. Feel it, but don't act on it. This is how you become dangerous under pressure. Not because you feel nothing, but because nothing controls you. Most people want emotional comfort. The top 1% want emotional mastery. Comfort feels good now. Mastery pays forever. It's not about being calm all the time. That's unrealistic. It's about being consistent in how you respond. Consistency beats intensity. Every time. You don't need to eliminate emotion to win. You need to stop letting emotion make decisions for you. That's real intelligence. And once you master emotional control, pressure loses its power. Because pressure feeds on emotion. Take that away and all that's left is a problem to solve. You've learned to pause. You've learned to regulate emotion. You've learned to think clearly when it counts. Now comes the hard truth. Control under pressure doesn't start in the moment. It starts long before. You've mastered emotional regulation. Now let's talk about why preparation decides everything. Chapter 3: Stress exposes the quality of your preparation. Stress does not create failure. Read that again. Stress does not create failure. It exposes it. When pressure hits and things fall apart, most people blame the moment. They blame the deadline, the conflict, the chaos. The unexpected obstacle. That's a lie they tell themselves to feel better. The truth is harsher and far more useful. You didn't fail because the moment was too big. You failed because your preparation was too small. That's the key. You don't rise to the moment, you fall to your training. Say it again, you don't rise to the moment, you fall to your training. Pressure doesn't magically make you better or worse. It simply removes the mask. It strips away hope, luck, and excuses. What's left is whatever you built beforehand, and most people build nothing. They rely on motivation. They rely on talent. They rely on figuring it out when the time comes. That's amateur thinking. The top 1% don't hope they'll perform well under stress. They engineer it. They prepare for pressure long before pressure arrives. You have a choice. You can keep believing you'll handle it when it happens, or you can accept reality. The moment doesn't decide, your habits do. Look at elite performers in any field. Athletes don't practice until they get it right. They practice until they can't get it wrong. Pilots don't train for perfect conditions. They rehearse engine failures, storms, emergencies over and over so their response is automatic. Military units rehearse worst-case scenarios relentlessly, not because they're pessimistic, but because they're realistic. They understand something most people don't. Under stress, thinking degrades, memory shrinks, creativity drops. So they don't rely on thinking, they rely on training. That's the key. If you need to think too much under pressure, you're already behind. The top 1% reduce decision-making in the moment by making decisions in advance. They ask questions before stress arrives. What will I do if this goes wrong? What decision will I make if emotions spike? What matters most if everything hits at once? They preload answers. So when pressure comes, they don't debate, they execute. You don't need their permission to prepare seriously. Not your peers, not your environment. Not the version of you that prefers comfort. Preparation is lonely. Preparation is boring. Preparation is repetitive. That's why it works. Most people prepare for success. The top 1% prepare for stress, because stress is what actually decides outcomes. It's not about raw ability. It's not about intelligence. It's not about confidence. It's about discipline. Specifically, the discipline to do the boring work before it's exciting. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If pressure overwhelms you, it's because you've never rehearsed handling it. If you freeze in conversations, you've never practiced difficult conversations. If you panic with money, you've never practiced financial discipline under constraint. If you collapse under workload, you've never built systems, only willpower. You have a choice. Preparation doesn't mean knowing everything. It means reducing uncertainty. And uncertainty is what creates panic. The top 1% hate uncertainty, not emotionally, but strategically. So they attack it early. They visualize scenarios. They walk through decisions. They plan responses. Not once, repeatedly. You don't rise to the moment, you fall to your training. That's not motivational. That's mechanical. And training doesn't need to be complex. It needs to be consistent. Here's a practical rule. If something causes you stress repeatedly, you should have a prepared response for it. Not a hope, not a wish, a response. What do I do when criticism hits? What do I do when time compresses? What do I do when emotions spike? Write it down. Rehearse it mentally. Execute it physically. That's how pressure loses power, because pressure thrives on improvisation, and improvisation under stress is sloppy. The top 1% remove improvisation wherever possible. They build routines, morning routines, decision routines, crisis routines, not because they're rigid, but because structure creates freedom under pressure. That's the key. Discipline before stress equals freedom during stress. Most people want freedom without discipline. They want flexibility without structure. They want confidence without preparation. It doesn't work that way. Stress always collects payment. Either you pay up front with preparation or you pay later with failure. You have a choice. And let's be clear, preparation is not overthinking. Overthinking is passive. Preparation is active. Preparation means doing the reps. Preparation means simulating discomfort. Preparation means practicing when no one is watching. That's why the top 1% look naturally calm under pressure. There's nothing natural about it. It's earned through repetition. Earned through boredom, earned through discomfort. You don't need to wait for confidence to prepare. Preparation creates confidence. You don't need motivation to prepare. Discipline replaces motivation. It's not about feeling ready. It's about being ready. That's the key. Every time you choose to prepare instead of procrastinate, you are future-proofing yourself against stress. Every time you skip preparation, you're gambling that pressure will be kind to you. It won't. Pressure is honest. It gives you exactly what you built, no more, no less. So ask yourself honestly, what have you been training? Panic, avoidance, last-minute scrambling, or clarity, execution, control? You have a choice: train now or be exposed later. You've learned how to read pressure. You've learned how to control emotion. You've learned that preparation decides performance. Now comes the next skill. Because even with preparation, pressure can overwhelm you if your attention is scattered. You've prepared the weapon. Now let's learn how to aim it. Chapter 4: Narrow the battlefield or lose the war. Pressure doesn't defeat you all at once. It overwhelms you piece by piece, and it starts with attention. Under pressure, amateurs try to manage everything. Professionals reduce everything to one move. That's the difference. That's the key. When stress hits, most people widen their focus. They think about consequences, outcomes, opinions, what could go wrong, what already went wrong, what this means about them. Their mind turns into a crowded room, too many voices, too many options, too much noise, and confusion always leads to hesitation. You have a choice. You can let pressure scatter your attention, or you can narrow it deliberately, because pressure does not reward awareness of everything. It rewards commitment to one thing, one move, one decision, one action. Say it again: one move, one decision, one action. Championship athletes understand this instinctively. In the final seconds of a game, they are not thinking about the scoreboard. They're not thinking about legacy. They're not thinking about what happens if they miss. They are thinking about the next play, foot placement, timing, execution. That's it. The amateur looks at the scoreboard and panics. The professional looks at the moment and executes. Same pressure, different focus. It's not about courage. It's not about confidence. It's about discipline. Specifically, the discipline to ignore everything that doesn't matter right now. Pressure creates urgency. Urgency tempts you to solve the whole war at once. That's how you lose. Wars are not won by reacting to every front. They're won by concentrating force where it matters most. That's why this chapter matters. If you don't narrow the battlefield, pressure will exhaust you before it defeats you. Most people under pressure ask the wrong questions. What if this fails? What will people think? How do I fix everything? Those questions paralyze. The top 1% ask better questions. What's the next move? What's within my control? What action creates leverage right now? That's the key. Pressure demands prioritization. Pressure means prioritize. Pressure means focus. Pressure means simplify. And simplify doesn't mean easy. It means clear. Clarity is power under pressure. Here's the hard truth. If you feel overwhelmed, it's because you're trying to carry too much at once. You don't need their permission to put things down. Not society's expectations, not imaginary deadlines, not other people's opinions. Focus is a choice, and focus always has a cost. When you choose one move, you are choosing not to do others. That scares people. They want to keep options open. They want to hedge. They want to stay safe. But pressure punishes indecision. You have a choice. Either you decide or circumstances decide for you. The top 1% decide early. They narrow the battlefield immediately. They ask, if I could only do one thing right now that would move this forward, what would it be? Then they do that. No debate, no overthinking, no emotional negotiation. Execution creates momentum. Momentum quiets fear. That's the sequence. Not clarity first, action first. Most people wait to feel clear before acting. that clarity never comes because clarity is produced by movement. That's the key. One move creates feedback. Feedback creates adjustment. Adjustment creates progress. Trying to manage everything creates nothing. Here's a rule to live by under pressure. If everything feels important, you haven't decided yet. Decision reduces chaos. That's why leaders appear calm, not because they know everything, but because they've chosen what matters. Everything else becomes noise. Noise is the enemy. Noise drains energy. Noise drains confidence. Noise drains time. The top 1% are ruthless with noise. They cut it off. Notifications, opinions, speculation. They don't ask for permission to focus. You don't need their permission either. And narrowing the battlefield doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means sequencing reality. You will deal with everything, but not all at once. That's discipline. It's not about being faster. It's not about being smarter. It's about being selective. Under pressure, selectivity beats effort. Here's a practical tool. When pressure spikes, write down everything competing for your attention. Then circle one thing, not the easiest, not the loudest, the most impactful. That's your battlefield. Everything else waits. And waiting is not avoidance, it's strategy. One move, one decision, one action. You execute that move fully, then you reassess. Pressure shrinks when you face it piece by piece. That's why people who multitask under stress burn out. They're fighting on every front at once. Burnout isn't caused by hard work, it's caused by scattered focus. That's the key. The top 1% conserve energy by narrowing attention. Energy is finite under pressure. Waste it on noise and you lose. Spend it on the next move and you win. And don't confuse narrowing focus with being careless. Precision requires focus. Sloppiness comes from distraction. Every great performance under pressure looks simple from the outside. That simplicity is earned. Earned by saying no. Earned by delaying less important decisions. Earned by trusting process over panic. You have a choice. You can try to solve your whole life in one moment, or you can solve the next 5 minutes correctly. 5 minutes done right beats 5 hours of chaos. Pressure doesn't want brilliance. It wants presence. Be where your feet are. Be where the decision is. Be where the action is. That's how the top 1% think. They don't expand, they compress. And compression creates power. You've learned how to prepare. You've learned how to control emotion. You've learned how to narrow focus under pressure. Now comes the next trap. Because even when you execute the right move, pressure can still hijack you. If you're emotionally attached to the result, you've narrowed the battlefield. Now let's talk about letting go of what you can't control. Chapter 5: Detach from outcomes to dominate performance. The more you obsess over the result, the worse you perform. That sounds backwards. It is. It's one of the most misunderstood truths about pressure. Most people think caring more leads to better results, so they grip tighter. They attach harder, they replay consequences in their head, and under pressure they fall apart, because attachment distorts judgment. That's the key. When your identity is tied to the outcome, every action becomes heavy, every decision feels dangerous, every mistake feels personal, and pressure feeds on that. The top 1% understand something simple and brutal. You cannot control outcomes. You can influence them. You can work toward them, but you cannot control them. Trying to do so creates tension. Tension creates mistakes. So the top 1% do something counterintuitive. They let go, not of effort. Not of standards, but of emotional attachment to the result. Control the process. Release the outcome. Say it again. Control the process. Release the outcome. This is not detachment as apathy. This is detachment as precision. When you stop needing a specific outcome to feel okay, your performance sharpens. Your hands steady, your mind clears, your decisions speed up, because fear loses leverage. You have a choice. You can perform to prove something, or you can perform to execute something. Performance for validation is fragile. Performance for execution is durable. That's the key. The moment you need the win to feel worthy, pressure owns you. The moment you commit to the process regardless of the outcome, pressure loses its grip. Look at elite competitors. They don't obsess over winning while they're playing. They obsess over form, timing, technique. Winning is a byproduct. The amateur stares at the finish line and trips. The professional watches their feet and keeps moving. Same race, different mindset. It's not about confidence. It's not about talent. It's about discipline. Specifically, the discipline to stay in the present moment. Outcomes live in the future. Fear lives in the future. Regret lives in the past. Execution lives now. Pressure drags you out of the present by threatening future pain. The top 1% refuse to follow it there. They anchor themselves in what they can do right now. That's the key. Here's the trap. When you attach to outcomes, you start managing perception instead of performance. You play not to lose, you speak not to offend, you decide not to fail, and that creates timid execution. Timid execution loses. Every time. You don't need their permission to stop chasing approval, not your boss's. Not the crowd's, not your own inner critics. Approval is not the goal. Execution is. And when execution is clean, outcomes take care of themselves more often than not. Here's a hard truth. The people who perform best under pressure are the ones who accept failure as a possibility. Not emotionally, strategically. They know they can do everything right and still lose, so they stop negotiating with fear. They say, I'll do the work correctly and accept whatever result follows. That's freedom. And freedom produces power. You have a choice. Either you let the possibility of loss weaken you, or you let it sharpen your focus. Loss only hurts more when you attach your identity to the result. Detach identity. Improve performance. That's the key. Control the process. Release the outcome. Let's make this practical. Before any high-pressure situation, ask yourself one question. What does good execution look like here? Not success, not winning, not approval. Execution. Define it clearly. If you're speaking, good execution might mean clarity and calm delivery. If you're negotiating, it might mean holding your position and listening fully. If you're competing, it might mean form and effort. Then commit to that. Judge yourself only on execution. Did you follow the process? Did you stay disciplined? Did you do the work correctly? If yes, you win regardless of the outcome. That mindset changes everything. Because when outcomes don't define you, pressure loses its emotional leverage. Fear needs something to threaten. Take that away and fear collapses. That's the key. Most people tighten under pressure because they're trying to protect something: status, identity, ego. The top 1% already accepted the risk. They show up to execute, not to be protected. That's why they look fearless. They're not fearless. They're unattached. It's not about not caring. It's about caring correctly. Care about effort. Care about discipline. Care about process. Let the rest go. You don't need to guarantee success to perform well. You need to guarantee presence. Presence beats pressure every time. And when you practice this, something surprising happens. Even when outcomes go wrong, you recover faster because you're not emotionally shattered. You assess, you adjust, you move forward. That's dominance. Pressure can't trap someone who isn't clinging to a specific result. You've learned how to prepare. You've learned how to control emotion. You've learned how to focus on one move. You've learned how to detach from outcomes. Now we go deeper. Because even with the right mindset, pressure can still hijack you if your body panics. You've mastered the mind. Now it's time to master the system beneath it. Chapter 6. Build a nervous system that doesn't panic. Most people think mental toughness lives in the mind. They're wrong. Mental toughness lives in the body. That's the key. When pressure hits, your body reacts first. Heart rate spikes, breathing shortens, muscles tense, vision narrows. Thoughts speed up. That happens before you think a single conscious thought. So if your body panics, your mind never gets a fair chance. You have a choice. You can keep trying to think positive in a panicked body, or you can train your nervous system to stay calm under stress. The top 1% choose the second, because they understand something most people don't. You cannot outthink a dysregulated nervous system. You must outtrain it. Calm body, clear mind, controlled action. Say it again. Calm body, clear mind, controlled action. That sequence never fails. Pressure is not just psychological, it's physiological. And if you ignore that, pressure will always feel overwhelming. Elite performers don't wait until they feel calm to act. They use the body to create calm. Breathing, posture, tone. These are not small details. They are control levers. That's the key. Let's start with breathing. Under stress, most people breathe fast and shallow. That signals danger to the brain. The brain responds by increasing fear. It's a feedback loop. Elite performers break the loop. They slow the breath deliberately. Long exhale, short pause, controlled inhale. Not because it feels nice, but because it forces the nervous system to stand down. You don't need their permission to breathe slowly. Not the situations, not the urgency, not the voice saying there's no time. There is always time for one breath, and one breath can change everything. That's the key. Next, posture. Under pressure, weak posture appears automatically. Shoulders collapse, head drops, chest tightens. That posture tells your brain you're under threat. Elite performers do the opposite. They straighten the spine, they open the chest, they ground their feet. Posture is communication. You are either telling your brain, I'm under attack, or I'm in control. Choose wisely. You have a choice. And then there's internal dialogue. Most people talk to themselves like enemies under pressure. This is bad. I'm screwing this up. I can't handle this. That language fuels panic. The top 1% use neutral, directive language. Slow down, next step, handle this. Not hype, not positivity, control. It's not about confidence. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Specifically, the discipline to regulate your state before you make decisions. That's the key. Elite performers understand this truth. State beats strategy. You can have the best plan in the world, but if your nervous system is panicked, you won't execute it. So they train state control like a skill, not once, not occasionally, daily. They practice calming their body under mild stress so it works under extreme stress. That's how training works. You don't rise to calm, you fall to whatever nervous system you've built. And most people have built a nervous system addicted to stimulation. Constant noise, constant urgency, constant reaction. Then they're surprised when pressure overwhelms them. You have a choice. You can keep overstimulating yourself, or you can train regulation. Here's a simple rule. If your body is chaotic, your decisions will be chaotic. So before you decide, regulate. Breathe first, adjust posture, lower the internal volume, then act. Calm body. Clear mind, controlled action. This is not theory. This is how high-stakes performance actually works. Special forces operators train breathing under fire. Surgeons train steadiness under pressure. Pilots train calm responses to emergencies. They don't rely on willpower. They rely on physiology. That's the key. Willpower collapses under stress. Trained systems don't. You don't need to wait until pressure arrives to build this. You build it now. Practice slow breathing when annoyed. Practice posture when tired. Practice calm speech when irritated. Small reps, every day. That's how your nervous system learns safety under stress. And once your body stops panicking, something powerful happens. Time slows down, perception sharpens, decisions improve. That's what people call ice cold under pressure. It's not personality, it's training. and here's the uncomfortable truth. If you panic under pressure, it's not because you're weak, it's because your nervous system was never trained otherwise. Now it can be. You have a choice. Stop shaming yourself for stress responses and start disciplining them. It's not about toughness. It's not about grit. It's about regulation. That's the key. When your body is calm, emotions lose intensity. When emotions lose intensity, thinking improves. When thinking improves, execution follows. Calm body, clear mind, controlled action. Say it one more time. Calm body, clear mind, controlled action. Pressure doesn't need to disappear for you to perform well. Your panic does. And panic is optional if you train for it. You've learned how to control your body under pressure. Now comes the deeper layer, because pressure doesn't just test skills, it tests identity. Who you believe you are determines how you show up when it matters most. You've regulated the system. Now let's talk about what pressure is really shaping. Chapter 7, Pressure is where identity is forged. Pressure doesn't just test skills, it tests identity. Who you become when it's uncomfortable, who you become when it's uncertain, who you become when it costs you something. That's the key. Talent might open doors, but identity decides how you walk through them, or whether you walk through them at all. Under pressure, most people shrink. They protect their ego. They protect their image. They protect the story they tell themselves about who they are. The top 1% do the opposite. They expand. They use pressure to test themselves, not defend themselves. Pressure isn't happening to me, it's shaping me. Say it again. Pressure isn't happening to me, it's shaping me. This is where the separation happens. Same pressure, same stakes, same environment. One person contracts, the other grows. And it has nothing to do with bravery. It has everything to do with identity. Most people build an identity around comfort. They define themselves by what feels familiar, safe, and controllable. So when pressure threatens that identity, they resist. They hesitate, they justify, they retreat. Not because they're weak, but because they're protecting who they think they are. You have a choice. You can protect your current identity, or you can build a stronger one. The top 1% choose growth over protection. They understand that pressure is not an interruption of life. It is the training ground. Pressure forges clarity. Pressure forges resilience. Pressure forges standards. That's the key. Who you are under pressure becomes who you are everywhere else. You don't magically become disciplined when things are calm. You don't magically become courageous when stakes are high. You reveal what you've been practicing. And most people practice avoidance. Avoid hard conversations. Avoid responsibility. Avoid risk. Then they're surprised when pressure exposes them. Pressure is honest. It shows you who you are without filters. The top 1% want that honesty. They seek it, not because it feels good, but because it's useful. Pressure isn't happening to me, it's shaping me. This mindset changes everything. When pressure arrives, instead of asking, "How do I get out of this?" they ask, "Who do I want to be in this?" That's the key. Identity precedes behavior. If you see yourself as someone who folds, you'll fold. If you see yourself as someone who adapts, you'll adapt. Pressure doesn't force an outcome. It reveals a self-image. So let's be clear. If pressure makes you smaller, it's because your identity is fragile. And fragility comes from avoiding discomfort for too long. It's not about confidence. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Specifically, the discipline to stay engaged when it would be easier to withdraw. The top 1% don't run from pressure. They run toward it strategically. They don't chase chaos. They choose challenges that stretch them. They voluntarily put themselves in situations where their current identity is insufficient. That's how identity upgrades. You don't need their permission to outgrow who you've been, not your past, not your peers, not the voice saying, "This is just how I am." That voice is lying. Identity is not fixed. It's trained. Every time pressure shows up, you are being asked a question. Will you stay the same or will you evolve? You have a choice. Most people choose familiarity. It feels safe. The top 1% choose expansion. It feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is temporary. Identity is permanent. That's the trade. Here's a hard truth. If you avoid pressure, you avoid growth. And avoidance compounds. You don't just stay the same, you become more fragile. Because the gap between what you can handle and what life demands keeps widening. Pressure eventually wins. Unless you change how you relate to it. Pressure isn't happening to me, it's shaping me. This doesn't mean pressure is pleasant. It means it's productive if you let it be. The top 1% reframe pressure as initiation. Every hard moment asks, are you ready for the next level? And readiness is not declared, it's demonstrated. Demonstrated by staying present. Demonstrated by acting with standards. Demonstrated by choosing effort over escape. That's the key. Identity is built through repeated decisions under stress, not one heroic moment, not one breakthrough, reps. Every time you choose to show up when it's hard, you cast a vote for a stronger identity. Every time you retreat, you reinforce a weaker one. No judgment, just mechanics. You have a choice. And here's the mistake most people make. They wait to feel like the person they want to be. That feeling never comes first. Behavior comes first. Act like the person you respect, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Identity follows action, not intention. That's the key. Pressure accelerates this process. Under pressure, you don't have time to pretend. You act from who you believe you are. So if you want to become someone formidable, pressure is your ally, but only if you stop resisting it. Stop asking, why is this happening to me? Start asking, what is this demanding from me? That shift turns pressure into a forge, and forges don't feel gentle. They feel hot, they feel intense, they feel unforgiving, but they produce strength. Most people want growth without heat. It doesn't exist. You don't need to enjoy pressure. You need to use it, that's the key. Pressure is where weak identities collapse and strong ones are built. An identity, once built, carries you everywhere. You've learned to regulate emotion. You've learned to prepare. You've learned to focus. You've learned to detach from outcomes. You've learned to control your nervous system. Now you've learned what pressure is really doing, shaping who you are. But there's another trap ahead. Even with a strong identity, pressure can derail you if your thinking turns catastrophic. You've built the foundation. Now let's refine the mind. Chapter 8. Replace catastrophic thinking with strategic thinking. Under pressure, most minds don't think. They predict disaster. They jump to worst-case scenarios. They imagine failure. They mentally fast-forward to loss, embarrassment, regret. That's catastrophic thinking, and it is poison under pressure. That's the key. Catastrophic thinking feels like preparation, but it's actually paralysis. It floods the mind with imagined threats and steals attention from what can be done now. Strong minds do something different. They don't predict outcomes. They ask better questions. You have a choice. You can let your mind spiral into what if everything goes wrong, or you can anchor it to strategy. Strategy is not optimism. Strategy is not denial. Strategy is focus. And focus begins with one question. What matters now? Say it again. What matters now? Under stress, weak minds ask questions that create fear. What if this fails? What if I look stupid? What if I lose everything? Those questions have no useful answers. Strong minds ask questions that create action. What's the smallest effective action right now? What moves the needle now? What's within my control? That's the key. What matters now? What moves the needle now? Say it again. What matters now? What moves the needle now? Catastrophic thinking widens the problem until it feels unmanageable. Strategic thinking shrinks the problem until it becomes executable. Pressure wants you to think big and vague. Strategy forces you to think small and precise, and precision wins. You don't need their permission to stop indulging fear, not the voice in your head, not past experiences. Not the urgency of the situation. Fear feels urgent. Strategy is quiet. That's why most people follow fear. It's loud. You have a choice. When stress hits, your brain will automatically offer you a story, usually a dramatic one, usually a negative one. You don't have to accept it. Thoughts are not commands. Thoughts are not facts. They are suggestions. And under pressure, many of those suggestions are useless. It's not about stopping thoughts. It's not about controlling thoughts. It's about redirecting attention. That's the key. Strong minds redirect quickly. They catch catastrophic thinking early and interrupt it with action-oriented questions. Instead of "what if I fail?" they ask, "what's the next step?" Instead of "this is too much," they ask, "what's one thing I can do?" One thing, one move. That's how pressure shrinks. Catastrophic thinking tries to solve the entire future at once. Strategic thinking solves the next 5 minutes correctly. 5 minutes done right beats 5 hours of panic. You have a choice. Here's the rule. If your thinking makes you feel helpless, it's the wrong kind of thinking. Useful thinking creates movement. Movement restores control. Control reduces fear. That's the sequence. Fear thrives in stillness and speculation. Action starves it. That's the key. Look at people who perform well in crises. They're not predicting outcomes. They're executing steps. Triage, prioritize, act. They ask, "what matters now?" Not later, not eventually. Now, catastrophic thinkers live in the future. Strategic thinkers live in the present. Pressure punishes those who abandon the present moment. Because the present moment is where leverage lives. You don't need to solve everything. You need to solve something, and that something must be effective. That's why the question is not, "what can I do?" It's "what's the smallest effective action right now?" Small, effective. Now that's the key. Small actions restore momentum. Momentum restores clarity. Clarity restores confidence. Most people wait for confidence before acting. That's backwards. Act first. Confidence follows. Catastrophic thinking flips this sequence and waits for certainty. Certainty never comes. So here's the discipline. When pressure hits, ban yourself from future-based thinking. No always, no never, no everything. Those words are red flags. Replace them with specifics. What exactly needs attention? What exactly can I do next? Specifics kill panic. Vagueness feeds it. It's not about intelligence. It's not about experience. It's about discipline. Specifically, the discipline to interrogate your thoughts instead of believing them. You have a choice. You can treat every stressful thought as truth, or you can treat it as a hypothesis that needs evidence. Most catastrophic thoughts have none. They are emotional forecasts masquerading as logic. Expose them. Ask, "is this useful?" If not, discard it. Replace it with a strategic question. What matters now? What moves the needle now? Say it again. What matters now? What moves the needle now? This is how the top 1% think under pressure. They don't ask how to feel better. They ask how to act better. Feeling better comes later. And here's the deeper truth. Strategic thinking is a habit. If you've spent years rehearsing worst-case scenarios, your mind will default to them. No shame, just mechanics. Habits can be retrained. Every time you redirect from catastrophe to strategy, you strengthen that pathway. Every time you indulge catastrophic thinking, you weaken yourself. You are training something either way. You have a choice, and don't confuse strategic thinking with coldness. Strategic thinkers still care. They just care about the right things. They care about leverage. They care about timing. They care about execution. They refuse to waste energy on imagined disasters. Energy is finite under pressure. Spend it wisely. Catastrophic thinking spends energy on futures you can't control. Strategic thinking invests energy in actions you can. That's the key. So the next time stress hits, and it will, catch the spiral early. Interrupt it. Ask the questions that create movement. What matters now? What moves the needle now? What's the smallest effective action right now? Then do it. No drama, no overthinking, no negotiation. Execution is the antidote to catastrophe. You've learned how to regulate your body. You've learned how to shape identity. You've learned how to think strategically under pressure. Now comes the final piece, because strategy alone isn't enough if you crumble the first time stress hits hard. You need exposure. You need reps. You need to be trained by pressure itself. Chapter 9: Confidence is built through repeated exposure to stress. Confidence is not something you wait for. Confidence is something you earn, and you don't earn it in comfort. That's the key. Most people think confidence comes before pressure. They think once they feel ready, then they'll act. That day never comes. Confidence is built after pressure, after you've been tested, stretched, and forced to respond. Pressure trained me. Pressure strengthened me. Say it again. Pressure trained me. Pressure strengthened me. The top 1% understand this early. That's why they don't avoid discomfort. They schedule it. They deliberately place themselves in situations that test their limits, not recklessly, not emotionally, strategically. Because every exposure expands capacity, you have a choice. You can keep waiting to feel confident, or you can step into pressure and build it the only way it's ever built, through repetition. Confidence is not a feeling, it's a memory of past survival, a memory of past execution, a memory of past resilience. If you haven't been tested, you have nothing to remember. So when pressure shows up, doubt fills the gap. That's the key. Pressure doesn't destroy confidence. Avoidance does. Avoidance tells your brain, I can't handle this. Exposure tells your brain, I've handled worse. And the brain believes experience, not affirmations. It's not about self-talk. It's not about hype. It's about discipline. Specifically, the discipline to face stress on purpose. The top 1% don't hope stress goes away. They use it like a gym. Stress is resistance, and resistance builds strength if you apply it correctly. Lift too heavy without preparation, you break. Lift nothing at all, you weaken. The answer is progressive exposure. That's the key. Most people only encounter stress accidentally. A deadline, a crisis, a confrontation. They're untrained, so they panic. The top 1% create controlled stress. They take on challenges slightly beyond their comfort zone. They speak up sooner than they want to. They take responsibility before they feel ready. They put themselves on the line when it's uncomfortable, not to prove something, but to train something. Pressure trained me. Pressure strengthened me. Say it again. Pressure trained me. Pressure strengthened me. Every time you survive stress without collapsing, your confidence grows quietly. No fireworks, no applause, just a deeper internal certainty. I can handle this. That certainty is priceless under pressure. You don't need their permission to challenge yourself, not your peers. Not your environment, not the version of you that prefers safety. Growth never asks for permission. It demands action. And here's the hard truth. If your life feels overwhelming, it's often because your capacity hasn't kept up with your responsibilities, not because you're weak. Because you've been avoiding stress instead of training with it. Avoidance feels good short term. It costs you long term. That's the trade. You have a choice. You can protect your comfort, or you can expand your capacity. The top 1% choose expansion. They understand that confidence is cumulative. Each exposure adds a layer. Each challenge handled becomes evidence, and evidence beats hope every time. This is why people who have been through hard things often appear calm, not because they're fearless, but because they're experienced. They've been here before. Pressure trained them. You don't get that calm by reading about stress. You get it by meeting stress and not running. That's the key. Let's make this practical. If you want confidence under pressure, you need planned discomfort. Choose one thing daily that creates mild stress. Make the call you're avoiding. Start the task you're procrastinating. Have the conversation you keep postponing. Not all at once. One rep, small stress. Repeated often. That's how the nervous system adapts. That's how identity strengthens. And that's how pressure stops feeling foreign. Pressure trained me. Pressure strengthened me. Most people think they need to eliminate stress to feel confident. The top 1% know confidence comes from familiarity with stress. Familiarity breeds calm. The unknown creates panic. So stop trying to design a stress-free life. It doesn't exist. Design a stress-capable one. That's the key. And don't confuse exposure with recklessness. You don't jump into chaos unprepared. You step into challenge with intention. You reflect afterward. What worked? What didn't? What did I learn? Reflection turns exposure into growth. Without reflection, stress is just pain. With reflection, stress is training. You have a choice. And here's something most people miss. Confidence is not about success. It's about recovery. Can you recover after mistakes? Can you adjust after setbacks? Can you keep moving when things don't go your way? Those skills are built under pressure, not in theory. Pressure trained me. Pressure strengthened me. Say it again. Pressure trained me. Pressure strengthened me. Every time you stay in the fight instead of escaping, your confidence compounds. Quietly, permanently. That's why the top 1% don't chase confidence. They chase reps under stress, and over time, confidence becomes a byproduct. You don't wake up one day feeling invincible. You wake up knowing you've been tested and survived. That's real confidence. Not loud, not arrogant, stable. And stability under pressure is rare. That's why it's valuable. So stop waiting. Stop telling yourself you'll act when you're ready. Ready is built by doing. You have a choice: expose yourself intentionally or be exposed unexpectedly. One builds strength, the other builds fear. Pressure trained me. Pressure strengthened me. You've learned how to think under pressure. You've learned how to regulate your body. You've learned how to shape identity. You've learned how to build confidence through exposure. Now comes the final step, because once pressure no longer scares you, life changes. You stop avoiding, you stop hesitating, you stop shrinking, you start leading. You're ready for the final lesson. Chapter 10 is Make Pressure Your Permanent Advantage. When pressure stops scaring you, life stops controlling you. That's the line most people never cross. They spend their lives reacting, avoiding, hoping pressure will ease up. It won't. Pressure is not a phase, it's a constant. The only question is this: who are you under it? You have a choice. You can let pressure dominate your behavior, or you can make it your advantage. That's the key. The top 1% don't seek comfort. They seek competence under strain. They want to know who they are when it's hard, when time is short, when stakes are high, when no one is coming to save them, because that's where life is actually decided. Others panic, I execute. Others hesitate, I decide. Say it again. Others panic, I execute. Others hesitate. I decide. This isn't arrogance, it's training. Pressure exposes what you've built. If you've built discipline, pressure amplifies it. If you've built avoidance, pressure exposes it. It's not about luck. It's not about talent. It's about preparation and standards. That's the key. Most people want pressure to go away so they can finally perform. The top 1% want pressure to arrive so they can separate themselves. Pressure becomes the filter. When pressure rises, amateurs collapse into emotion. Professionals rise into process. You've learned how to do that. You've learned to stop reacting. You've learned emotional control. You've learned preparation. You've learned focus. You've learned detachment. You've learned physiological control. You've learned identity under strain. You've learned strategic thinking. You've learned confidence through exposure. Now you integrate it. This chapter is about ownership, because pressure only becomes an advantage when you expect it. Surprise creates panic. Expectation creates readiness. That's the difference. You don't walk into hard moments hoping they won't be hard. You walk in saying, "This is where I'm strongest." You don't need their permission to adopt that mindset. Not your coworkers, not your family, not your past self. This is a decision. You have a choice. Here's the shift. Most people ask, how do I reduce pressure? The top 1% ask, how do I perform better because of pressure? That question changes everything. Pressure sharpens focus. Pressure eliminates nonsense. Pressure reveals priorities. Pressure doesn't complicate. It simplifies. That's the key. Under pressure, only what matters survives. So if pressure overwhelms you, it's often because your life is cluttered with things that don't matter. Too many commitments, too many opinions, too many distractions. Pressure forces clarity, and clarity is power. Others panic. I execute. Others hesitate. I decide. The moment pressure hits, you narrow the battlefield. One move, one decision, one action. You control your body. You slow your breathing. You lower your shoulders. You steady your voice. Calm body. Clear mind, controlled action. You don't fight pressure, you use it. That's the advantage. The top 1% are calm not because they're relaxed, but because they're aligned. Their actions match their values. Their preparation matches their responsibilities. There's no internal chaos. Pressure doesn't scare them because it doesn't expose contradictions. That's the key. If pressure reveals anxiety, something is misaligned. Fix the alignment. Not the pressure, and understand this. Making pressure your advantage doesn't mean you enjoy stress. It means you trust yourself under it. Trust is built through kept promises. Every time you show up when it's hard, trust grows. Every time you avoid, trust erodes. That's not motivation, that's math. You have a choice, and here's the final discipline. Stop talking about pressure as an enemy. Language matters. Pressure isn't attacking you. Pressure is testing you, and tests are opportunities to prove standards. So when things get heavy, you don't say, "This is too much." You say, "This is where I'm built to operate." Others panic. I execute. Others hesitate. I decide. This becomes your internal identity. Not loud, not performative. Stable. You don't announce it. You demonstrate it. And over time, people feel it. They trust you in chaos. They look to you when things go wrong. They follow you when stakes are high. Not because you talk well, but because you don't fall apart. That's leadership. And leadership is simply pressure handled well. Most people want influence without responsibility. The top 1% accept responsibility because they can handle the pressure it brings. That's the trade, and it's worth it. Because once pressure becomes familiar, fear loses its grip. You stop avoiding opportunities. You stop overthinking decisions. You stop shrinking in moments that matter. Life opens up. Not because it's easier, but because you're stronger. That's the advantage. So here's the final instruction. Expect pressure, train for it, welcome it. When it shows up, don't ask, "How do I escape?" Ask, "How do I execute?" Others panic. I execute. Others hesitate. I decide. Say it one last time. Others panic. I execute. Others hesitate. I decide. This is not a mindset you turn on occasionally. It's a standard, a permanent one. You have a choice. Live reacting to pressure or live using it. This audiobook wasn't about eliminating stress. It was about becoming the person stress can't break. You don't need their permission to live at that level. You've learned the system. You've built the framework. Now you live it. Pressure is no longer the problem. Pressure is the proof. Pressure will never disappear from your life, but panic can, hesitation can, mental collapse can. The top 1% are not calmer because life is easier. They are calmer because they train their minds to stay present when everything feels urgent. From this moment forward, pressure is no longer your enemy. It is your signal to slow down, simplify, and act with precision. So the next time stress hits, don't rush, don't react, don't run. Breathe, decide, execute. Your challenge is simple. Seek pressure instead of avoiding it. That is where the winners are made.